Knowles and Kurt Baden as presenters tonight. Cathy and Kurt have been managing the Prescott Audubon American Kestrel Nestbox monitoring program. We appreciate their time and their talents in preparing and presenting to us, and their dedication in ensuring that this program succeeds.
Thank you. Well, thank you for inviting us to present this Window on Nature talk. Kurt and I, as Joe said, volunteered last year to take over the Kestrel Nestbox program. And I thought, well, what better way to prepare for our new responsibilities than to prepare this presentation? This presentation is purposely broad. And it's really because I knew nothing about the natural history of kestrels, nor did I know how the Nestbox program of Prescott came to be. And I also didn't know how or why Nestbox data are gathered and how they're used. So, as advertised, we will be presenting the results to date from the Nestbox program, but it's going to take us a little while to get there. I should mention up front that Kurt really gladly allowed me to speak for both of us tonight. I don't know whether to thank you or not. Yeah. So, we're going to cover these things first. We're going to talk a general description of the species. Then I want to talk about the origin of the Nestbox program here in Prescott in the context of raptor conservation, because I didn't know that, and it kind of wrapped it up for me. Also, we're then going to talk about the breeding phases of the kestrel that Kurt and I will be monitoring for at all of our nest sites. So I'll go over those breeding phases. And then we get to results to date. What active nests we've had in all the boxes since 2017. And then we're going to talk about post-breeding season activities that Kurt and I will be involved with. And then a little bit about the Nestbox data, how it's used in research, just a couple slides. And then we'll end it with really what we envision is some initiatives that we'll take over in the future. So because that is a lot to cover, and I can be loquacious, I'll probably read my notes so I can stay on point. Okay, Falcos parvarius is the genus species name. It means sparrow falcon. This falcon is one of many kinds of diurnal raptors, which are birds of prey that hunt during the day. Falcons are distinctive, though, from other raptors in that they have generally long pointed wings and a really sharply curved beak, down-curved beak. They also have what's called, did the wrong thing, a tomial tooth, which is a triangular shaped sharp ridge on their upper mandible, and it works in conjunction with a notch on the lower mandible, so they're pretty efficient, like a pair of scissors, to grab prey and sever their spinal column. The other distinctive thing is that all falcons, unique to raptors, is that they have these things called nasal tubercles or cones in their nares, and they act as baffles to slow the air flow in as they're in a real rapid dive so that they can breathe. I've heard that that's what jet engines and planes use to model their cone baffle in the middle of their, I don't know whether that's true, but I've heard that. Okay, general size, they're about the size of a mourning dove or a jay. So they're 8 to 12 inches from the tip of their tail to the end of their beak. Their wingspan, 20, 24 inches, pretty lightweight. I love this picture because I didn't really I'd never seen a kestrel sitting on a wire in Prescott, and I've lived here 20 years. It's not to say they weren't there. I probably in my mind said, oh, it's a mourning dove, because I was told that they look like mourning doves, but doggone, if you see their head and it's rounded and chunky, that's a kestrel. And you see them a lot sitting on the wires. They are distinct also from other diurnal raptors in that they have a difference in their feathers. It's called plumage dimorphism between the males and the females. So you can see that the males have these blue wings and a rufous back and tail. They have a spotted breast. I guess I could use this cool pointer. They have a spotted breast, and they have this subterminal band on the tail. It's very distinctive. Whereas the females they have rufous wings and a rufous banded tail, and their breast is more streaked. So very distinctive difference between them. Their distribution is widespread. They go all the way from Canada down to South America. You can see the color coding of the breeding grounds. I don't know what, migration isn't up there. I don't know why they don't have it. So you see that they breed through most of, they breed up here in Canada, but they are year-round, which is purple, in our area. They don't breed in southern Texas, but those in southern Texas go up to northern Texas to breed. They don't inhabit the Amazonian rainforest. There are 17 subspecies of Falco sparverius. We have 2 in the United States. The most broad in its distribution is Sparverius sparverius. The other one is in Florida down here, and it's Sparverius paulus. That's another subspecies. And then there's 17 others that are in South America. Okay, the conservation status is least concern, and it really basically means that the species is currently not facing a high risk of extinction. That being said, the population trend is declining. The species is declining, has been over the past 60 years. So this map shows the population trends within 26 bird conservation regions in North America, and 23 of these regions show declines, and it's expressed as the annual percent of change in kestrel numbers. So these data are based on U.S. Geological Survey breeding bird surveys that were started in 1966, and this data goes through 2019. So you can see that these declines vary in magnitude. You see the different colors across the various regions. So in Arizona, that's us, it shows that the annual percent of change ranged from 0 to just under 1% in the southern part of our state from 1966 on, but it ranged between 2% and a little over 4% in the northern parts. It has been stated that this represents a nearly 50% drop in the number of kestrels since 1960 in the United States. That's a pretty big drop. These data are corroborated by data from fall raptor migration counts, from Christmas bird counts, and from kestrel Nestbox occupancy data that's been mainly collected in Canada and eastern United States. However, a 2023 article published in the Journal of Raptor Research reported a raptor population index, and it was calculated, this index, from a compilation of autumn hawk watch sites across North America. And the index indicated that kestrel population declines have moderated in the last decade. So they could be stabilizing at a new lower abundance in some areas. The reason for population declines are not known, but near the end of this talk I will present a list of the possible reasons. Okay, we'll talk about some of the other descriptors about it. It is a cavity nester. It is unique among all diurnal raptors for this. It's the only cavity nester of the diurnal raptors. They use woodpecker excavated natural tree cavities, and they can use building eaves also. The cavity entrance should not be obstructed by any overhanging branches. So this is very helpful because they can use nest boxes because they're cavity nesters. This, can you see there's fledglings? Okay. Habitat. They like open to semi-open habitats, having patches of short ground vegetation. Most of the prey is captured on the ground, so they're seeing it and flying to the ground, so they're not going to be in areas with big tall grass. Suitable nest trees and perches are required. They, like I said, they're obligate secondary cavity nesters, but they also are predominantly a sit and wait predator. So they're going to sit on a wire, they're going to sit on a tree and look for prey. And they can also inhabit areas when you that have good foraging habitat but don't have those perches. And so you can introduce nest boxes and they can be used there. They've done that in lots of agricultural lands where they've removed the trees and they've added nest boxes to replace the natural cavities that have been removed. Okay, they eat a variety of animals, including insects, which make up a really large portion of their diet. They also eat small mammals, birds, lizards, small snakes, and frogs. It's known that they, along with many other birds, can see ultraviolet light, which is reflected by the urine trails of rodents, so they can spot a meal on the ground. Their diet varies geographically and seasonally, and it's reflective of what species are most abundant, and also which of the prey items have the highest capture success rates. Studies have shown that they are most successful at capturing large insects over more elusive small mammals or small birds. American kestrels are also known to cache prey items to eat later, and they cache them within their own territories. I didn't mention on the slide, but American kestrels themselves are prey items for larger raptors. So they're at risk of being killed by Cooper's hawks, red-tailed hawks, even great horned owls. It's a disadvantage of being small. Okay, I was doing all this research and I go, it's called Falcosparverius. It's in the Falconidae family. Why is it called a kestrel? So what is a kestrel? Well, Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines a kestrel as any of various small, chiefly Old World falcons of the genus Falco that usually hover in the air while searching for prey. So I said it's mainly a sit and wait predator, and it can do that, but it can also just sit and hover. And that's the name. Kestrel, I think, was called wind hover in some foreign language. Anyway, the evolutionary lineage of kestrels started in Africa 2.5 to 2 million years ago. Those spread through the Old World to Australasia by 1 million years ago. But based on the appearance and behavior, the American kestrel was for many years considered a member of the primarily European and African kestrel clade within the genus Falco. But DNA analysis shows that American kestrels emerged recently in North America and then spread to South America. And it's an example of convergent evolution. So where a small falcon that hovers to hunt food now has a niche in the New World. And it's really genetically more closely related to large American falcons, like our peregrine falcon, prairie falcon, Alpamato falcon. So I thought that was pretty cool. If you thought that was cool about the American Kestrel's genetic lineage, then here's another fascinating insight into the evolution of all falcons that's come from genome analyses. Anybody want to take a guess at what kind of birds are most closely related to falcons? What? Owls? Good guess. It's a raptor. Hummingbirds? Oh, she's getting close. Parrots and songbirds. So you can see the how the ancestral branches of the birds have branched off. And here's the accipiters. Here's what we know is our hawks and, eagles and vultures. And then way over here, and further, more recent in time, are falcons. I just thought that was cool. Okay. Well, now let's jump from an overview of how American kestrels came to be over millions of years to how the Prescott Audubon Nestbox program came to be in the last decade. So as a result of I don't know what my notes say. Anyway, we'll start in the 1950s, 1940s actually, and 50s. DDT was introduced. It was used extensively for controlling insect-borne diseases like malaria, typhus, among military personnel and civilians, and was used as agriculture, pest control, and household use. By the 1960s, peregrine falcons were gone from the eastern United States. In large portions of western states, it was due to the effect of this pesticide. So in August of 1965, there was a first peregrine conference, and it was organized at the University of Wisconsin Wildlife Ecology professor named Joseph Hickey. He was the successor of Aldo Leopold, which I thought was pretty cool, his faculty position. So Hickey assembled nearly 60 biologists and other scientists from 7 countries to compare data and discuss reasons for the sudden disappearance of the peregrine falcon and other birds of prey. This conference is one of the first moments in history where a group of scientists set an agenda toward resolving an urgent conservation problem 2 decades before conservation biology was founded as a scientific field. Pretty cool. So at that first conference, biologists concluded that the peregrine falcon was in serious decline around the world. And there were concerned enthusiasts in the sport of falconry that believed that breeding falcons in captivity would be a way to keep the species alive if the birds were to become extinct. And I put that link up there for a YouTube video, which celebrates the 50-year anniversary of this conference, because it was so seminal. In 1969, there was another conference held. It was at Cornell University, and as a result of that, there was an urging for Canada and Mexico to protect the remaining populations. Immediately after that, the U.S. Department made a list of species that were endangered. Department of Interior did that. And also in 1970, the Peregrine Fund is founded. And the biologist Tom Cade from Cornell University founded it. And it was to save the falcons from extinction. The organization really pioneered many techniques through the years for successfully breeding the birds in captivity and releasing them into the wild. And in 1972, EPA bans the use of DDT, and it really made the recovery of that species possible. Okay, 1973, Endangered Species Act is passed. Peregrine falcon is still listed as endangered. And in 1974, This is all the research that Peregrine Fund came up with on breeding. They begin to reintroduce peregrine falcons into the wild. Between 1974 and 1997, they released over 4,000 peregrine falcons that had been bred in captivity. That's pretty cool. So in 1999, the peregrine falcon is delisted. And it's really because DDT had been banned, and it was also because the Peregrine Fund released all those captive bred peregrines. And then getting closer to how our program came about, the Peregrine Fund expanded its focus to include over 100 other raptor species worldwide. Then in 2012, the Peregrine Fund founded the American Kestrel Partnership, which was focused on kestrel nest box monitoring. And the goal of AKP was to develop and coordinate a network of locally managed nest box monitoring programs across North and South America, to generate data on phenology, on occupancy, productivity, and survival, to advance kestrel conservation, and to relate the data to environmental factors such as land use, landscape composition, climate variation, and environmental contaminants. Oh, and I put that note there that there were other kestrel nest box monitoring programs in existence before 2012, but AKP and the launch of that really was the catalyst for the Prescott Audubon Society Nestbox program. 2017, we're getting closer here, Arizona Game and Fish Department got on board to support the initiatives of the American Kestrel, it's not called Project Partnership. The Game and Fish Department lacked the manpower themselves to set up Nestbox networks. So Kurt License of Game and Fish starred in a video that the department released, and its goal was to recruit volunteers to participate in building and in installing and monitoring nest boxes in Arizona. And in 2017, Prescott Audubon Society agrees to install and monitor 4 kestrel nest boxes for game and fish. We did the history. Okay, here comes Prescott. Let me back up 1 year. Prescott Audubon Society installs 2 wood duck boxes along Granite Creek. This area of Granite Creek is within the Watson Woods Riparian Preserve. It's managed by the nonprofit organization Prescott Creeks. It's a 126-acre area, remaining portion of what was once a 1,000-acre riparian forest of cottonwood and willow trees. It's really rare habitat and only one of 3 habitats in Arizona where wood ducks are known to breed. So then, that was 2016, and then 2017, like I mentioned, Prescott Audubon Society, they added 2 more wood duck boxes, but they added those 4 kestrel nest boxes to support Arizona Game and Fish. And Dave Frechette is the volunteer who built and monitored the wood duck boxes, and then he agreed also to monitor for game and fish those kestrel boxes. So that's, and then from 2017 to 2024, Dave managed this Nestbox program, again, for Audubon Society and in coordination with Arizona Game and Fish. There were over 20 kestrel boxes that were added. They were either donated by Game and Fish, or they were bought by Prescott Audubon, or they were built and donated by Dave. And then in 2024, last year, Dave decides to retire. And Dave, Kurt and I volunteered to be the new managers. And this is a great picture of Dave. He's the one holding the ladder, and there's Kurt and I. And every time I look at this picture, I think of the theme song of Ghostbusters. Who you gonna call? Nest Boxers! I told you I needed to stay on point. Okay, Dave was really an accomplished birder. I mean, he was an extraordinary volunteer. He was an accomplished birder and an engineer. So he built many of the boxes. He selected all the Nestbox sites. He installed, maintained, and monitored between 18 and 23 boxes, including those wood duck boxes. What's really cool is he designed a pole for a lot of those boxes. And what he used was really lightweight aircraft-grade metal used in hang gliders. And the reason he did that is he himself was a hang glider. So he knew how to get those materials. He says, we can't get them anymore. You have to get them from overseas, and there's probably a tariff. Anyway, so the poles are really easily erected. They sit in a sleeve in the ground, and even my size, you can pick it up, the box is 10 feet up, and lay it down on the ground so you can service that box. So it's a wonderful, unique design. I thank Dave for that. Okay, so here's the current nest boxes that we're going to be monitoring, Kurt and I, this year, for the first year alone doing this. 8 of them are on private land, private hosts, one of which is here today. One is in Prescott National Forest, 4 are on City of Prescott land, and 4 are in that Watson Woods Riparian Preserve. And I wanted to show this slide. This came from the database called Nestwatch that Cornell Lab has, and it shows the 2024 snapshot of the nest boxes that are in that database. Anyone can contribute to scientific research by finding, monitoring, and reporting bird nests, and then upload it into Nestwatch. It is a nationwide nest monitoring database. Their program, Nestwatch, it's designed to track the status and trends in the reproductive biology of birds, including when nesting occurs, the number of eggs that are laid, how many eggs hatch, and how many hatchlings survive. I have been told by Game and Fish that there are about 160 Kestrel nest boxes that have been installed in Arizona. I don't know that they're in this database, and I don't know if they're even monitored. A lot of people put up a box and then not monitor them, and then the data doesn't get in here. But one thing's obvious is that in Prescott, I think we have the largest number of boxes in any one network. There's about 11 boxes that are in the Red Rock Ranger District of the Coconino National Forest. I know they monitor 11 boxes, and they've had one box that for like 3 consecutive years has produced fledglings. There's some other nest boxes that have been erected around the area that in 2018, there was one installed at Tuzigoot, one at Montezuma Well. Let's see, there's an International Raptor and Falconry Center installed, one at a private school in Cornville. There's 3 at Dead Horse Ranch State Park, several boxes on City of Clarkdale land along the Verde. I don't know if they're all being monitored. That's one of the problems. If you invest in installing a box, then they're not of any use for data unless you monitor them and maintain them. Okay, now we're going to talk about those breeding behaviors or those things we have to monitor for at each nest site. So we conduct regular site visits, usually begins in March, to all of the boxes, and we follow set protocols. The protocols are established, they're published by Cornell Lab and other groups, and we follow the protocols to ensure that monitoring does not negatively impact a pair of kestrels that may be using the box. And the protocols can include things like the visit frequency, the time of day we visit, how to approach a box, how to leave a box so that you're not leaving a predator trail to the box, how fast the visits need to be. So there are these published set protocols, and they can be found on Nestwatch and some other sites. They make you take a test on Nestwatch. At each visit, we're going to note whether there's kestrels that are present. Then we're going to note if there's courtship or bonding behavior. We'll also note if there's nesting, incubation, or brooding going on. And then the age of nestlings. So we'll go through each one of those. Courtship and pair bonding. So this can start February, March. A lot of that's going on at one of our boxes in Chino Valley right now. So some of this that goes on is the females can advertise, hey, I'm interested with this flutter, glide, flight. Sometimes the males do it. The males advertise their territory by doing some aerial displays and dives, and then they have that clee call. I can't imitate it. Also, the male selects, he has a territory, and he selects a cavity, and then he gets the female to come and inspect the cavity. So he's the one that looks for the house. And then there's some male to female food transfers during this courtship and pair bonding period, and a lot of copulation. Every time Dave said he would go to a box and there's kestrel there, I go, what were they doing? They're copulating. And that really, well, of course, it leads to fertility, laying of eggs and changes in hormones and all that. So, and they're just wonderfully aerobatic. That male is copulating, and they don't hop over onto the female. They flutter down and they balance on the back, and she moves her tail, and it's a really coordinated, wonderful thing. And that's food sharing on the bottom picture, where the male is bringing food to the female during that period. Then there is nesting that comes after the courtship. Sticky pages. And that starts March or April. There is no nest material that's brought to the cavity, so we usually leave 2 to 3 inches of wood chips in each of the boxes so that the eggs don't roll around and they can form, the parents will scrape and form a little cup to hold the eggs. They lay 4 to 5 eggs, one every other day, and they are speckled. The speckled pattern on American Kestrel eggs is interesting in that most cavity nesting birds lay white eggs because there really isn't a reason to camouflage your eggs because it's in a dark hole. So scientists believe that their eggs indicate their relatedness to non-cavity nesting raptors. So generally the first egg laid is, the last egg laid is the lightest in color. So the first egg laid, and this is true in a lot of birds, that it's like they run out of ink. And so the last egg is lighter in color, and there's all sorts of antioxidants and things that are biologically important in those pigments, but I didn't get into that. So the last leg egg is paler, but it's not known if this in kestrels reflects a difference in egg quality between the first and the last egg, whether that egg will mature and is just as viable. We don't know. I should also mention that they typically produce 1 clutch in a single breeding season. Also I haven't mentioned that their lifespan, kestrel's lifespan in the wild is about 5 years. The oldest kestrel that's been recorded in the wild was 11, but they're usually 5 years in captivity, and they're bred very successfully in captivity and used for research to study toxicology and behavior. But they can live at like 14 to 18 years in captivity when they're raised. So because of that, you can see that they really can have about 5 clutches. They're sexually mature and can have a brood when they're 1 year old. So The next phase from laying the eggs is incubation and then brooding. So they start incubating after the last egg is laid. It takes 28 to 32 days. It's conducted mainly by the female, but they both have a brood patch so that they both can brood. The female broods the nestlings continuously for 10 days after hatching, and the male provides food for her during that time. And then after that period of 7 to 10 days, they both bring food to the nestlings. So when we visit a nest box and we know there's a pair of kestrels that are nesting in it, we inspect that box in the most unobtrusive way. And we do that by using a camera mounted on a pole that Dave designed. And we set the camera to record. It's a little camera. We set to record, and it's attached to the end of the pole. And then we lift the pole up, 10 feet in the air, and we put that camera in the 3-inch diameter hole. And then we, turn it around, and then we bring it back out and down, and we look at it. And that's the way we can tell, are there eggs, are there nestlings, how many of them, and we record that information. So now we have that phase where nestlings are maturing to fledging. And that takes 28 to 32 days before they fledge, after they've hatched. Fledging means they're going to leave the box. They can actually fly out of the box. So we want to band them before they fly out of the box. So the optimal age of banding is 16 to 25 days, and we use this published photographic timeline to determine the age. It was produced by Hawk Mountain Sanctuary. And here's some of the pictures from that photographic timeline. So you can see it goes from a 1-day-old chick with its sibling that's not out yet, to 2-day-old, and then I think that's, I can't read it, 11 days, 16 days, all the way to 25 days. And one thing that's really cool is that once those primaries pop out, once the feathers pop out, you can tell male and female. So if they have a bluish, grayish cast to them, they're the males on the wings. If it's brown, they're the females. And it just becomes way more obvious at 25 days, all the way over on the right. And so we look at our photograph, we guess based on that photographic timeline what the age of the nestlings are, and when we think we need to get them banded before they fledge, and we call up Arizona Game and Fish. And this is Kenneth Jacobson. He goes by Tuck. And then he's out of the Phoenix office, but he lives up in Prescott Valley. And so he arranges to come out and band all the nestlings. And this was last year he did this. He does the dangerous part, getting up on the ladder. And he's taking them out of the box very carefully. The adults are off looking from a distance, is what we're doing. And he's putting them in a bag and bringing them down for us. And then all the helping hands come out. Everybody wants to hold a kestrel nestling because they're just beautiful. So this was back in 2017. Remember I told you that Audubon Society erected 4 kestrel nest boxes in Watson Woods Riparian Reserve. This is one of the nest boxes that produced some birds. And that's the hands of Michael Bird, the executive director of Prescott Creeks. That's him holding a kestrel. And this is Tuck, and he's banding a bird, and that's his son. Oh, and then this was 2024. This was last year. And Kurt didn't get to go for this banding. He wasn't in town, so everybody had a turn. There was a 5th person that got to hold the 5th nestling, but it didn't fit up on there. Pardon? Yes, yeah. They typically lay 3 to 5 eggs, and so they had 5. And the next phase is when they jump out of that box for the very first time. And they're old enough to do that. What's interesting is the parents still bring food to the fledglings for up to 12 days after they pop out of the box. They will return to the box at night to roost, again in this up to 12 days after they fledge. And then the siblings alloprene one another and beak one another and stick around. I've read that it's really unusual among raptors that fledglings show non-aggression towards each other. So this is pretty interesting. The American Kestrel fledglings tend to fly together and perch together and roost together for some time after fledging. And this is what they're doing. Dad brings, this is Dad. He's just dropped a lizard, and his son has grabbed him. And the two sisters are looking as their brother is eating that lizard. So the homeowners that have this box got to be quite entertained watching those fledglings hang around their box for a couple weeks. They disperse after 2 to 3 weeks. Studies estimate that the survival rate for fledglings is 30 to 50%. It's tough. So we're to the part where I get to present the results to date. What has been the results over the past 7 years? Well, 88 American Kestrel nestlings have been produced out of 10 of our boxes. That's great. Okay, so here's the results table. And we can see for each year the number of nest boxes that were used and the total number of nestlings that fledged that year from those boxes. The table also shows that there were 19 additional birds that fledged from a single cavity in one dead tree, and that was that dead tree I showed you where the 2 fledglings were there. So there was an additional 19 that were produced from that natural cavity. We see that the average number of fledglings per nest box is 4.2. I think it went up to 4.7 when I added the 19 from the natural cavity. You can see that the number of boxes has dropped over the last 2 breeding seasons. The number of boxes used each year varied from 4 to just 1. So there's 4 used in those years and 1 in some others. So to compute box occupancy rate, which is the number of boxes used divided by the number of boxes that are available, we needed to know the actual number of available boxes in the field. And I really was only confident about what that number was in 2017 and what it was last year. And it doesn't mean the data wasn't there, I was just too lazy to go through all the detailed notes. So I didn't have that information. Some of the available boxes, so the number of available boxes increased from 10 to 23. Some were moved or removed. So the denominator for occupancy rate, it's not constant. It's not constant either in number from year to year, nor is it constant in location. So the occupancy rate for 2017 and 2024 looks like really dramatic drop. And it might suggest there's a decline in the number of kestrel breeding pairs over these 7 years. But it could also be the result of placing more and more boxes in less suitable habitat. So we're just changing the denominator. So you really can't, researchers really know, you really can't use occupancy rate as an indication of population trend unless you have a method of setting up some boxes that you decide you were never going to consider moving. They're going to be your subset, and that's a subset of boxes that you're going to use for estimating trends. So other Nestbox programs across the U.S., they've been monitoring over several decades, and they've shown occupancy rates declining over years, and it agrees with observed declines in bird count numbers. So we don't have occupancy rate, as I mentioned, that's robust enough to indicate a local population trend, but our program is valuable in reporting to Nestwatch the timing of nesting and important breeding parameters such as clutch size, nesting survivorship, that are of value to researchers. So so we've also never seen predation on eggs or young in our nest boxes, nor have we seen the takeover of any of our boxes by starlings or wasps or house sparrows that could explain nest box avoidance. We do know of one box that human disturbance probably caused a kestrel pair to avoid returning to it after it had been previously used. So the next slide is going to show the brief history of each of these 10 successful nest boxes. So this slide lists all the 10 boxes that have been used by nesting kestrels over the years and their current status, whether those boxes are active, still in place where they are, or they've been removed. What's most obvious by the highlighting is that 4 of these boxes that have been used have been removed. And I'll explain that in a minute. But first we see that of the 10, half of them were used only once. We see that one box was used for 4 consecutive years. That's box F. And 4 boxes were used for 3 consecutive years. And you can see that there are 6 boxes in white that are still in the field, and we're still hopeful that they will host some kestrels. This one we know already has a kestrel pair that's hanging around, and it's been producing an active nest for the past 3 years. This will be 4 years. And like I said, we unfortunately removed 4 of these boxes that had produced nestlings, and it's been for these reasons. Either abandonment due to disturbance. Box F down at the bottom, it was abandoned after 2020 when a neighbor's tree was used by fledglings for protection was cut down. So, we don't know if the same parents came back to that nest and decided, yeah, we're not going to do this. And then H2 was removed because the property owner asked us to, even though it had produced nestlings. And we've had one Nestbox W2 that just wasn't being used, but it also wasn't being monitored. So they weren't even telling us if kestrels were around, so we moved it, which was fine with the owners. And then, whenever the owner requests it, we move them. Okay. So we've gone out, we've checked, we've seen the nestlings mature, we've gotten game and fish out, we've got them banded. We've got to observe the fledglings before they disperse. And now we have these post-breeding season activities, one of which is to enter all of our data that we've collected into the Nestwatch database. And then document wood duck nest box contents. And I'll show you why this is really a post-season activity in the next slide. Maybe we need to present a wood duck nest box talk, because I didn't focus on that here. Okay. And then we send year-end summary report to Audubon. We send it to Game and Fish, to all the Nestbox hosts and volunteers. And then we remove or relocate nest boxes as needed, and then if appropriate, we expand the program. So the wood duck nest boxes, this is the one slide for this. The hatchlings leap out of the nest within 24 hours of hatching. So when we go to a nest box, a wood duck nest box, we visit it, we look inside with a camera, just like we do kestrel boxes. The only difference between them is the shape of the hole. The wood duck boxes, they're oblong hole, and they like it better. I guess they fit better. And the kestrels are round, but the kestrels can use a wood duck box. So we'll peek in there with a camera, and we could see, like I see, white eggs. A cavity nesting bird has white eggs. And we can see down. They actually bring down into their nest. And we go, oh, wood duck's in here. We'll record the date and what we see in there, the eggs. But we don't need to go back there, because the minute they hatch, we ain't going to see them. Because they're precocial and they're going to hop out. So post breeding season, we go to those nest boxes and we pick them up and bring them down and look at eggshell fragments, whether the eggs are whole or fragments, and then we estimate, how many nestlings we think popped out and survived. And then we did a box moving this last year after the breeding season, that natural cavities in a dead tree, and you could see that there's 3 of the fledglings. And I don't know which one of the cavities was their nest, but it's sitting at their nest site. That tree could fall over, and Dave Frechette has noticed a tree that was hosting a pair in a nest, and it fell over, and probably the female died with the nestlings. So we don't want that to happen again. There was a nest box in the area in the Prescott National Forest that was mounted on a tree, and it had never been used. So we went out, we took the box that was on the tree, we put it on a pole, we put it closer to this dead snag, and in view of it. So hopefully it'll happen not during breeding season, but we're providing another resource for nesting if that tree were to fall over. So I mentioned way at the front of the presentation about a slide that I would present showing the possible reasons for decline. And these are areas that researchers say we still need to investigate because we don't know. And some of the reasons for the decline in kestrel populations could, of course, be habitat loss, degradation of kestrels on kestrel overwintering ranges. It could be that anyway. And then within breeding season, alterations of habitat quality forming ecological traps. So, you might have a breeding pair that comes in and there's enough forage, there's enough prey items, and then all of a sudden it's some harvest season and you've trapped that animal during a breeding season. It's this ecological trap where their survivorship has gone down because they were attracted to an area that then changed in its quality. Cooper's hawks directly preys on kestrels, so they think, well, maybe it's predation, or they just restrict the distribution of kestrels. Also, insect population declines, and an asynchrony of the emergence of insects with the timing that the birds are used to for nesting. It could just be an asynchrony there. They could have impacts because of rodenticides, insecticides. Kestrels, like I said, they breed very well in the laboratory, and they've done toxicological studies. They have found that they are impacted by rodenticides and nicotinoid, I can't say that, neonicotinoid pesticides. And then also they want to look at direct and indirect impacts of climate change. So there's 2 slides I wanted to present to show that there are nest box data that are used in research. And these are the different databases that have gathered nest box data. Cornell Nest Watch, American Kestrel Partnership. American Kestrel Partnership merged with Cornell now. But anyway, you can see there's nothing in Arizona. But hopefully, if we get more nest boxes and we get more volunteers and an active network, we, in the future, could have some data that can contribute. This study was looking at that asynchrony, the hatching synchrony of kestrels with emergence of spring. You know, are they in sync? So, but they use Nestbox data. And then, I really like this map. This is a really cool map. It shows how nestlings from nest boxes in the wild were used to create this map, and it's known as a genoscape. So the American Kestrel genome, it was sequenced to identify genetically distinct populations across the US and Canada breeding range. Well, they took 20 Arizona samples of pin feathers from nestlings that were collected in the wild from nest boxes by Kurt license of Game and Fish. And with that data, and of course everybody else in the nation, they showed that there were 5 distinct populations of kestrels. And then this genoscape can be used to test hypotheses explaining observed population-specific responses to climate change and stress. So, what do we want to do in the future? Well, we are going to transfer the management of 4 wood duck and 3 kestrel boxes that are in and adjacent to Watson Woods Riparian Preserve. We're going to transfer that to Prescott Creeks. And then we want to reassess disturbance levels at existing sites and relocate boxes as needed. We know we're not going to use occupancy rate to look at population trends because we're just messing with that denominator. But we do want to provide nest boxes that are viable alternative cavities for natural cavities. So we do know that they are disturbed if there's human activity close. So we want to see if we still have them in the right place. And then we want to identify areas of planned habitat degradation. Is there a new subdivision going in to habitat that is really good foraging habitat for kestrels, nesting habitat? Is there a way we can mitigate the loss or the degradation of that habitat? We may not be able to do this. Identify agricultural businesses in suitable habitat that may benefit from nest boxes, orchards, gardens, large scale, not marijuana growers. They're all undercover, so that wouldn't work. The last thing is really cool. We want to consider the installation of battery-operated webcam in our boxes, and then you could watch on the webcam. We can also, we want to think about thermometers. It is known in some areas that temperature can really high temperatures, heat waves, unexpected heat waves that have been occurring during the breeding season has caused nestlings not to survive. So we want to do that. And then somehow expand public interest in support of raptor conservation. And I asked Tuck Jacobson, the game and fish guy, can we start banding adults that are brooding, that are in the nest boxes? And he said, yeah, we could consider that. So, because then you could find out, are the same male and female coming back to the same nest? Or is it the same male but a different female? You know, they don't have a long lifespan, but at least we could answer some of that. So how can you help? One of the obvious ones is if you're out hiking in the field and you see a nest box, they're pretty camouflaged. I keep wondering, am I going to find them all this year? We do have lat-long coordinates for them, but we try to keep them hidden. We don't want people to disturb them. You don't want to cause a pair to be disturbed. So stay away if you see one in the field. If you would like to host a nest box on your property or help monitor, you can contact us. If you see a kestrel with a band, what is he? B97. that male in Chino Valley, if you see one, please contact us. I don't think, we've never seen a banded kestrel come back to any of our sites, but doesn't mean we won't. Okay, and the generic ways to help, first off, if you have dead and dying trees, leave them on your property if you can. You can cut the crowns off so that it won't topple over and be top heavy, but try to keep them. And then avoid the use of pesticides, rodenticides, plant a variety of native plants. This one is unpopular, keep your cats inside. And you can also donate to organizations. You can adopt a kestrel nest box from Boise State University. So that's the end. We want to thank all the partners and time for questions. Yes, sir. 10 to 30 feet is what's recommended. 10 to 30. Oh, the question is, how high do the boxes have to be off the ground? And they specify 10 to 30 feet. There's some studies in Florida where they couldn't find a propensity for them to pick some higher or lower. It didn't seem to matter, but the protocol is 10 to 30 feet.
Anybody else? I have a question. How did, when you take the camera up, is it going video or are you taking snapshots?
It's video. Yeah, we put it on video
sense.
and it's running, so you get a picture of your toe, and then
So you have to somehow figure out how to stabilize it so you can see.
No, it's pretty stable. When
Good.
you get it in there and then just turn a little bit, it's amazing. And you can take snapshots of that within
Sure.
the video.
Yeah, then you grab the snapshots. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, Deanna.
Thanks. If someone wanted one in their own backyard, do you come and survey it and see if it's a good spot?
Yes.
Okay.
We did have an occurrence of someone asking, they were so excited, can I put a nest box on my property? And I said, I couldn't go out there. I said, could you please give me your address? And then I got on Google Earth. And you can zoom in, and I saw the habitat, and it was a subdivision. It was a new subdivision. It didn't have any trees. It didn't have any vegetation. And I said, you can put one up if you want to, but you're going to be really disappointed probably. But yes, we can do that. Yes?
Okay. We've got one more. We've got one right here.
I don't have a question, but I have a piece of information about kestrels.
Yes.
About 60 years ago when I was in college, living in married student housing on campus, my neighbor across the street had a pet kestrel in a cage, and he taught it to hunt like any other falcon.
Yeah.
And we took it out to the intramural football field and turned it loose, and he gave it its command, and it knocked down the robin and held it until he went over and picked it up.
You know, I've read varying things about you do want to start with an American Kestrel if you're into falconry, or you don't. They're so small, and you have to monitor that weight of a kestrel when you use it in falconry, because it's not going to go kill something. So you have to keep its weight, you know, and I guess because they're small, they're harder. But then I've read, oh no, if you're going to get into falconry, start with an American Kestrel. But a robin, that's a big bird. That's huge.
He held it down with his wings over the top of it like that, you know, until the trainer came over and picked it up.
Could you see it use its toenail tooth?
Used to turn it loose in our married student housing area, you know, to concept that's from World War II. And my son was about 2.5 years old, and stand out with his hand up like that, and come sit on his finger.
Just for those who are online and for the recording, that was pretty interesting. He said that the took it and put it through they could let the kestrel out in the housing, and basically it became the pet for the whole student housing. Very good. Mary has a question.
So could you just, again, repeat what the habitat would be that would maybe host a nest? I mean, like, if somebody, you know,
Yes.
for the wider audience.
Yes. Several acres, I don't remember, I could probably look it up, of open habitat or semi-open habitat, short vegetation, preferably native vegetation, you know, and perching areas. So it could be on the edge of a forest where there's an open area.
It could also be along the side of a road. See a lot of them perched on wires, just watching that ground, watching the meal. And if there are no perching places, that's why they're famous for hovering. They can suspect where an area is and then they'll hover over that area and just wait as they would on a perch, swoop down and grab a grasshopper or a lizard or whatever they're happening to be hungry for.
Yeah, that property that I said I looked at through Google Earth, it was all disturbed, the vegetation, and there wasn't large swaths. There was a green belt that was narrow and long, but it didn't, you know, and there are numbers, I can look it up for the number of acres that they say should be available for foraging. Yes, sir.
What about pinyon juniper areas? Do they habitat in that area?
Evidently, pinyon junipers are not that good of a tree to build cavities in, and they don't make their own cavities. Can you put a nest box in them? They need open area to hunt. They're not going to be in a wooded area, a pinyon juniper woodland. Is that,
Okay, thank you. Oh, one more.
There actually was one kestrel that was banded that was seen the next year. He was born on the west side of 89 up in Chino, and he ended up in a box on the east side the next year with a female, and they had a clutch. So yeah.
from one of our boxes?
Yeah. So that was about 3 or 4 years ago. Dave will be able to tell you for sure, but
I'm going to
yes.
have to pour through his notebook.
I imagine he can tell you exactly what year that was, because that was pretty
Okay, because
special.
I didn't think any of them had been seen. Thank you, Laura. Thank you.
Okay. My only comment, and we'll wrap this up, is the way I identify a kestrel on a wire driving down the highway. They're always looking down. Because that's where they're feeding.
Yeah.
So a long time ago, my wife's the birder, but I do pretend to be one. But that's my tool. I always know it's a kestrel upon a first glance because he's staring at the ground. Kind of like me when I look at my feet.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Another round of applause.
Thanks. Thank you.